Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeaux. We are the founders of Lumia.
And we're super passionate about all things coaching, and we want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training thousands of life coaches.
Let's dive into the science and magic of coaching.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about how coaching supports strong decision-making. Noelle, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? It seems like you're not feeling that well today.
I'm a little under the weather, but the good news is that brains still work even when your body is feeling a little sick.
Yes. So let's work our brains with this episode. I like the word strong. It comes out at me. We're not just talking about decision making, but we're talking about strong decision making. What do you mean by strong?
Well, when we're thinking about coaching, what coaching does, so many times we talk about the outcome set that we're going to accomplish our goals, whether that's building stronger relationships, communicating more effectively, or changing something about ourselves or our lives. And these are wonderful things to talk about. But what we're not talking about that I think everybody needs to know, and the reason for our chat today, is that implicit in every single outcome that is positive is a good decision that was made along the way, a decision that was made with data and intention. And that's what I mean by strong decision making.
Yeah. So I tend to, this is great for me because I tend to be impulsive. I tend to be, I'm not thorough. And so when it comes to making decisions, sometimes I look back and I was like, oh, I should have put it through some kind of filter, some kind of strainer. That's where this comes in.
Yeah. And what you're saying is really important. Do I have your permission to
yes. Tear me down? Yes, you do. Always.
No, not tear you down, but really just kind of normalize what you just said and talk about the way that adults operate in our very complex world. So what you're talking about is essentially limbic response, that we take in billions and billions and billions of bits of information every second, but we can only process 44 cognitive, conscious pieces of information at a time. And as adults, we're asked to make decisions. And we live in a culture in the United States of America where quickness is valued above slowness. So when that decision making has to happen, we've all been socialized that we need to make a split decision. And what actually happens in adult human brains is that we are reacting instead of responding and driving our thought processes into our limbic system and making emotional, impulsive choices based on the way that we feel emotionally and the way that we perceive ourselves as relating to data. Yes. And that last point is really important because there's a big, huge difference between the way that we perceive ourselves relating to data and the way that we actually relate to data. What do you think the difference is?
Ooh, that's actually really good. So the way that we perceive, the way that we relate to data. So for me, when I think about perceive, I think about my lenses, my story, how I'm wired, what activates me. The way that I see a situation is going to be different than, or possibly different than the way someone else, for example, you may see a situation and that may just be because of how, what we went through in our history. So, I tend to pull, or I'm more aware of it now, but I tend to pull more from emotion, which you mentioned, and that leads to a reaction and not a response. So you're definitely someone who's more thorough. You take your beats, especially when it comes to, bigger life decisions. I have in the past made very impulsive decisions and then regretted it. And I think, it just comes from, I think part of it is just my wiring.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right that part of it is your wiring, and that wiring is is part of all humans. So, what you're describing, thinking about your emotions, thinking about your lived experience, thinking about your memory, about your past, that is 100% how most humans respond to things. And it's called the availability heuristic. And it's actually a form of bias that our brain knows that it can't take in all the data that we need to do to make decisions in the moment. And what you're experiencing with that impulsivity is an evolutionary response, where the idea that I have to make a decision now comes because of survival instinct.
Mm,
And what actually happens is our brain takes a shortcut and goes back to memories, data that we already know, that we're already familiar with, and cuts out any data that we might have access to, but is just not familiar to us. And
yeah.
so our brains actually set us up to miss out on the observation and processing of more data sets that we actually have access to.
Yeah. So can we, I could think of a actual real life example that seems pretty simple, but can we apply how uh, running it through coaching can support a stronger decision?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
So one of my one of my stresses recently has been my editor not emailing me back. Just due to what's on her plate and who knows, right, where she's at, what she's going through, other books that she has launching. And so I find myself getting very reactive, impatient, and then going to, something's wrong, and then getting angry and all of that. So where would data fall into this where I can make smarter decisions instead of throwing rocks at her bedroom window and, that kind of stuff?
I mean, first of all, I'm impressed that that those are the action sets that you have in your repertoire right now. And listen, what you're describing is another facet of really human response. So, a big part of coaching is when you come together with coach and client, that coach is going to hold up a mirror for you so that you can see and understand yourself.
Mm,
And what you're talking about here is I'm aware that I'm telling myself a story and that I have needs and goals for myself that when it meets with reality, aren't exactly working out to meet my expectations, right?
right.
And so if we're just kind of breaking this down and thinking about, all right, what do coaches do? Coach and client come together to achieve a goal. So in this situation, the larger goal could be writing a book, having it published. Would you
Mhm.
say that that's an accurate goal state?
Yes, writing a book, getting it published, meeting the deadlines, right? All the deadlines that you're expected to meet as a writer.
Jumping through the hoops, right? So you're going through a really human process.
Right.
And at the starting line, what coach and client need to do is to examine the goal itself. Is it achievable? What are the blockers? Who are the stakeholders? What's the measurement? What's the timeline? What's the access to resources? And then coach and client set that agenda each and every session. So this would be probably an example of a mid-contract blocker where
Mm,
you're coming to the table and saying, my editor isn't getting back to me. This is driving me crazy. I'm having emotional responses to it. And you're really self-aware. And so you are able to pull out of the gate, and I'm telling myself a story.
right.
So let me ask you, what's the goal state here that you want to achieve?
I want to feel heard as a writer underneath this, but on the surface, what I want to achieve is uh, turning my book in time, getting paid, and then for the book to be published. I mean, those are the three big things.
Yeah. And so what you have on your hands here is we need to sit down as coach and client and take a look at the blockers and the stakeholders and how we're going to measure this thing. So what I'm hearing, at its core is that there is a stakeholder involved in your particular goal. Do I have that right?
Right, like a gatekeeper, like a piece of this that I have no control over.
A piece of this that you have no control over. Absolutely. And so when we're looking at this, I'm going to ask you to dig down a little deeper and figure out, okay, if all of this is true, What's the actual goal here?
What do you mean if all of this is true?
If it is true that your goal is to have your book published in a timely manner,
Right.
and there is a human
Right.
that is a stakeholder and a blocker, what is your true goal?
Just to make my side of the bed or take responsibility of my, my homework, what I'm obligated to do, which is email, keep in touch, let her know where I'm at. I don't have any control of her hitting the ball back in when she does that.
Okay. So I'm gonna demo here. I'm gonna pull the wool back. So, dear reader, what you might be noticing is that John is describing only what he can see from the perspective of what this blocker looks like and how it can work.
Mhm.
And when a coach comes into the equation, that coach can provide a secondary lens that John doesn't have. And
Mhm.
I am not a stakeholder in John's life. So, what I'm seeing
Mhm.
here is that there's a relationship that you might need to develop more effectively in order to get what you want.
Sure.
Have you given any thought to the relationship that you have with this editor and its health?
Yes, the relationship is good, but it's also a new relationship as my
Mhm.
other editor has moved on to other things, and so that's part of this is learning to dance with someone new.
Yeah. So I want to challenge you right there. If the relationship is a good one, what do you think might be underneath all of this distress that you're experiencing and the inaction on the part of your editor?
It's the emotional piece. It's stuff that's tied to my story. It's the false belief that they may find out I'm not a real writer. It's insecurities, stuff like that that surface because the ball's not rolling.
Okay. So what we have going on here is you have a bucket of emotions that you have attached to this thing.
Mhm.
And then you also have a person in your life that you need to partner with in order to get things done. Have you ever had a conversation with your editor about the way that you relate to each other in terms of emotional impact and financial impact?
No.
Mm, that's interesting. So, if you were to have a conversation like that, what do you think the possible outcomes could be?
I think me understanding that she works differently, me understanding that it's not a personal thing, me understanding that maybe she has her workload is tremendous right now. So yeah, so like instead of seeing it just through my lens and my feelings, pulling back and kind of the 360, right? Empathy and the other person's story and where they're coming from, so you understand the whole situation, which is actually data instead of me personalizing it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, I'd like to ask your permission to add a different lens to this as well as a possible outcome.
Hmm.
So, another possible outcome of having a conversation with your editor around what you want the relationship between you to look like and feel like, and what this person wants that relationship to look like and feel like, you might also be able to brainstorm and team up on some solutions
Hmm.
to calm your personal anxiety. Might not be full communication, but might just be, got your email, I'm slammed, here's the timeline you can expect from me.
Right. And I think because I'm not getting that, I jump to conclusions, I panic, I get emotional, and the house of cards comes crumbling down.
Yeah. So I want to unpack what just happened in this conversation. So I was demonstrating coaching and applying it to John. And what was going on there is, as coach and client, we were examining the blockers, the stakeholders, the measurement, possible outcomes that John hadn't seen. And what I Noelle was able to see was at the core, there's a relationship between two people that's not functioning. And what's happening in that dysfunctionality is emotions from John that's leading to reactivity. And adults rarely take time to sit down and strategize like this from a 360 perspective. Adults typically take their emotions as fact and then plow forward. So if John had not taken the space to apply this to a coaching conversation, you'd be left with the emotional hangover of, it's like dating, right? And somebody's not texting you back and you're like, oh my God, am I getting ghosted?
Yeah.
Right? So this is pushing on your limbic and reptilian brain and causing these deep emotional drives. Now, I seriously doubt that your editor wants you to feel that way. In fact, your editor probably wants you to feel great, because the better you feel, the more you're going to write and the more money everybody's going to make. And so from a streamlined approach to productivity, person A and person B need to come together to figure out how we're going to correct the emotional situation in the relationship between us, right?
Yeah.
So that's part one of decision making, is really getting to the goal state, unpacking it, and perhaps having an alternative lens. Because what I noticed that you were doing, John, is you were putting it all on you, of like, I have to change. I have to change everything. And you weren't thinking about what would it be like for me to ask for support.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it becomes a kind of inner conversation, inner fight, inner struggle. And then you kind of start to feel more alone, which then amplifies your emotions and frustrations and anger and all that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to use a scaling question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how willing do you feel to email your editor, communicate with your editor in some way and say, hey, I'd like to create time for us to have a one-on-one conversation to talk about, the impact of the relationship that we have with each other on each other?
Yeah. What was the question, and what's the scale that I would do that?
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel?
Oh, 9,
A
8. I
nine.
think this is important, especially if you want to have a good, healthy, productive relationship with, your partner, your editor.
This is a 9. So, very quickly, we were able to move the problem of I don't like the way I feel and drill it down to the actual goal of I'd like to move, turn the dial inside of this relationship, because there's an outside strategy taking place with a coach. And then the scaling question is used to determine client readiness.
Yeah.
And so once you take that action step, what we would do as coach and client is evaluate it. How did it go?
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel?
Right.
Is this a step that needs to be repeated? Or is there more to learn? Are there additional things to do? And what I would want to do as coach is also source your readiness to see if you would want to game plan and role play and actually go into that conversation with your editor with talking points all queued up, so that you're not shooting from the hip when you get in there.
Yeah, I love what you just said. I do that a lot with my clients, and it's so important to actually in the room, in the coaching session, to practice, to do the role playing. And it may feel kind of weird and scary, but it's so helpful, because the coach can walk you through the actual, instead of just saying, go do this, you could practice with and on your coach.
Yes, absolutely. And so, let's bring this back to decision making, because this is a behavioral facet that isn't given enough attention.
Mhm.
Just in the everyday rigmarole of going through your life, what you do, what you say, how you act, how you behave is going to have tremendous impact on the way other people relate to you and how effective you're able to be in the world.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is creating space to analyze your own behavior, your own intention, and to hypothesize about potential impact on your life, on your world.
This is what adulting looks like, and adulting is so hard, Noelle.
It is what adulting looks like, and it is so hard. And it's also why having partnership in this is really important. And I can't emphasize enough that there is no situation, interpersonal, relational, strategic, that is too small to
Mhm.
apply this kind of 360 application to. I do this personally in my own practice a lot in dating,
Right.
because what you're describing, those, that like tornado of feelings that sits on the other side of like actual communication
Mhm.
is vast.
Yeah. And also, they say, especially with children, it's better to be yelled at than to be ignored. It's the ignored part that activates the inner, am I worthy? The whole rejection, and then internalizing things, and that's usually what's difficult.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, and then for the sake of time, I will tell you how this played out. But I think with this specific example, because of my own insecurities as a writer, and have been, rejected, I think the panic is, instead of trusting that, contracts were signed and things are going to play out and there will be a return and your book will be published, having doubt in self because someone didn't text you in the time that you wanted her to, that it deletes, your where you're at, your career, how much you've worked. It like deletes the whole thing. And so that's the whole, in my head, jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing.
Yes. Yes. All right. So I'm going to demonstrate the complete value of coaching right now. So, John, I want to ask your permission to levy an observation.
Yes.
What's missing in that entire equation is your own agency to manipulate the situation and foster better relationships where you don't have to be left hanging. You have
Mhm.
a voice, you
Mhm.
have fingers, and you can ask questions.
Right, like you mean, standing up for yourself in a way.
Standing up for yourself, or getting together with your editor and saying, listen, I impact your life, you impact mine. When I don't hear from you, here's what happens for me emotionally, and this is how it impacts my work. If you can send up a flare, a flag, anything, it will help me be better at my job, which will help you be better at your job. What do you think? Can you do that for me?
Right, right, and so hard to do. I know many people struggle with this, and we're using this example with career, but especially in personal relationships, asking for what you need, what you want, what you deserve, that kind of stuff is difficult, but it's also a practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, finally, I think one of the major aspects of coaching that we're seeing here, in this specific example, is the process of listening deeply and mirroring back to the client, both what the coach heard and what the coach didn't hear.
Right.
So when John was talking all about how he feels. This is where I'm at. I use this term very lightly in terms of kind of a victim mentality of my life is happening to me. And
Sure.
what I honed in on really specifically as a trained coach is, where is your agency? What is the action that you can take to turn the dial from my life happening to me towards me happening to my life?
Mhm.
And that is a major shift. And so if you are my client in session, I would bring that up probably repeatedly to the end of time, at every single point where you need to make a decision. John, are you letting your life happen to you, or are you happening to your life? What do we need to do here to turn that dial?
Right, to get the power back.
To get the power back. And then we analyze all the different data sets, we game plan, and then I put the ball in your court to say, well, what feels comfortable to you? How
Right.
do you want to proceed? And then how will we know if it's effective? So how about we take a look there to kind of close this out. So given that your readiness to act in this situation is pretty high, it's at a 9,
Mhm.
how will we know if you've been effective in having this conversation?
If I actually do it.
Well, I'd say that's part one. So,
The result of it.
dear listener, what we're observing is that John's not actually ready to have that conversation because you gave me a 9 and then just threw major doubt that it was actually going to happen. So what's going on there?
No, I will do it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the ending to my little story saga is after a week, she did finally contact me, and she said she was in New York launching Viola Davis's book for the last 3 weeks and all that. So that's data I did not have, which then of course eased my panic.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I hear that. So, like, pulling the lens back on decision making, what we're talking about for you, and I swear this is the exact same conversation I have in all of my dating coaching clients, is you have a lot of control over what happens in that in-between space. You have a lot of control over what happens in the in-between space of sending a message and receiving a response. And if that 3-week time period is too long, if that is unacceptable to you, again, what you're missing in this equation is your agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you need to turn your decision-making dial in terms of self-talk, action, speaking up, and partnering with others to get your needs met? Because that's the bottom line here, is in this particular relationship, your needs aren't being met. And yours a partnership here.
Man, listen to the certainty of Noelle's voice. I love that how she brought it home. I feel like you really, at the end, punched it, which is great. And also bringing it back to you is also what Noelle is doing, bringing it back to you. So yeah, thank you. I love it. There was a little mini journey there.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, when I was asking you, how will we know if this is effective? What I'm thinking about are 2 different measures that moving forward, you'll be able to evaluate the way that you feel in terms of engaging with this editor. And moving forward, you'll have some specific data on whether this editor can hear you and actually honor your socio-emotional needs for any kind of response to indicate life on the other end so that your limbic system can calm.
Yeah, trust is built.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Exactly. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, my friend. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much for coaching me this morning. And if you're listening, this is coaching. This is coaching in real time. So hope that was helpful for you and you learned how coaching can support strong decision making. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to lumiacoaching.com/everything. Explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a bold community to do it with.
Lumia is ready to equip you with the tools, training, and community you will need to reach your goals. If you're ready to build a unique coaching business on your own terms while making an impact on the world at large, Lumia is the next bold step in your coaching journey. That's lumiacoaching.com/everything.
And hey, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it.